Welcome back to our Idea Launch series. So far, we've talked about the risks associated with creating a new software product. In our last episode, we talked about the whole journey of discovery and why we start with discovery, why discovery matters to help us begin to knock down some of that risk and build our confidence that we're creating the right product. Today, what we want to talk about is we want to take a little deeper dive. We talked last time about the importance of making sure we're clear on the problem that we're solving, the problems that the product is addressing for the user. Let's talk a little bit today about how we do that. My name is Darrin Grove. I'm the founder of TrueFit. My background is software development. Joining me today again, welcome back, John. John Beck is
Hi, Darrin.
Director of Product Design here at TrueFit. So this is really all about defining product strategy.
Yep.
Kind of starting there. We talked about this last time a little bit. Many of the people we talked to are diving right into trying to define solutions too early. I'm guilty of this. It's probably the engineer in me that wants to start figuring out what the solution is and how to build it. That's my reflex. But you've taught me to make sure that I'm super clear on the problem. So this is up front. We've just had a workshop where we're kind of getting all the background material, and we're headed into the problem space. We refer to it as understand and frame. Start to unpack that for us. Where do we go next?
Sure. So, really what we're trying to do, on one level is jump in and understand the domain. We're coming to it as product experts, but not necessarily deeply understanding the domain and from a business or a user experience standpoint. So, we talked a little bit before about the discovery workshop, and that's a great place where we come together and we kind of take kind of an initial survey of the landscape in terms of the user needs and what the business outcomes are that you're really needing to hit, who the stakeholders are, what does the market look like, but where, we come out of that workshop is a sense of kind of where the gaps are then, like, hey, maybe we don't understand as much about users as we thought we did. We don't know where they're coming from. We don't know what other tools they're using. We don't know what their experience is like when they're using our product or a competing product. So one of the first things we do is we kind of triage the scenario in terms of risk, and then we start diving into these pockets based off risk priority. So, for example, user interviews. Typically, one of the first things that we do is we go out and we'll set up an early set of usually a small number of qualitative interviews. So when we say qualitative, it's not, we're not taking measures, we're not counting numbers. We're going in and we're unpacking. Essentially, what we want to unpack in a user interview is understanding what their current reality is. Like, how do you, when you're trying to do X, tell me about what it is that you do. Like, how do you go about doing that? Where do you start? Where do you begin? And we get them to start unpacking that journey that they're going through. What goes well in that process? What does not go well? What are the workarounds that they're using? Like, I use the software to do, A, B, and C, but then when I need to schedule a meeting, I got to go out into my email and I got to go into my calendar tool and I got to maybe make a phone call. And so we start to map that out. The other thing that's important there are emotional aspects and sometimes social aspects too. And that'll come out in the interview, that if those usually don't come out when you're talking to subject matter experts. It's like, we want to get to the core, person that's using the product and say, how do you feel at this point in the when things go wrong, or as you're starting to do a certain task, like, how do you feel? Like, what's the critical thing that you're trying to get past? That gives us a much more rounded understanding of, when we talk about great user experience, a lot of what the teams are trying to do is anticipate where the user needs to go next. And often that's not really known, and that comes from that deeper understanding. So in a similar way, though, that's going to tell us about users. So we use user interviews. When we need to understand stakeholders and we need to understand the business, usually the workshop is more about alignment and trying to understand where the end goals are. But we often need to circle back and talk to a VP of sales or a director of customer support or a head of somebody who's heading up like regulatory controls for something, and understand kind of really what's driving the business from their perspective. What does success look like for them, and how can we make sure that the product hits the right targets for them? In a similar way, many software products can really be the front end of the whole service that the business is providing. And so with service design, there's kind of an idea of a front stage and a backstage. So the front stage is where the user is sort of interacting with the business, but the backstage can sometimes be very complex. Think of buying a car or going through a doctor visit, that I'm going to talk to somebody at the nurse's desk, but then she's going to slide the door shut and she's going to go back into the office and do a bunch of stuff. They're going to check my insurance. They're going to make sure that the doctor's ready or that the exam room is ready to go. So when we do service blueprinting, that's what we're trying to do, is really kind of map out all those steps that are happening in the background. What kind of report or artifact comes out of that, and they have to review that before they can get back to the patient that's sitting in the exam room. So
that's going back to this idea of context. The product is
Yep.
not a standalone thing. The product is being used by a user in a particular context, and very often there's stuff going on
exactly
on either side of or while they're using the product. We want to pay attention to all of that so that we know. We see opportunities, if there's opportunities to automate things in that whole service experience.
Exactly.
We want to make sure we pay attention to context.
Yeah, that often is this sort of hotbed of opportunity too. There's all kinds of insights that come out of that, and understanding kind of also the kind of rhythm of how software works in somebody's life, of, when, I'm submitting something and now I need a response and I want it quickly, or I have to notify multiple other parties that we're on to the next step of a transaction. So starting to map that out. And a lot of what we do, we'll talk about sometimes kind of an abstract concept, but early on in the project, we want to take a divergent path. We want to poke down every hole that we can around user needs, stakeholder needs, the market, the technology, the business, and understand and uncover all these needs. And then we start the process of converging towards meaning and being able to frame things in terms of priority. So that's a lot of what we're doing early on. I mentioned like the market, like sometimes it's a very competitive situation, and we got to understand the market that you're entering into to understand like what are table stakes, what are, how is the product going to differentiate itself from other products that have maybe been out there for longer that people know.
How often do we find that people are even aware of the competitive landscape?
Often we often hear, there are no competitors. We're on our own. Like where we're going, there's nobody else. And when we talk about competitors, it's, sometimes there are direct competitors, and we reveal things that with a little bit of investigation, we find that there are people that are offering solutions. So when we talk about competitors, they're not necessarily a competitive or a competing business. There are solutions out there that are competing for your target user's attention.
Got it.
And so sometimes, your competitor, you might be competing against a paper date book, or
Right.
you might be competing against a phone-based service.
Other ways of
Yeah.
solving that problem.
Yeah. So it isn't always, and sometimes, our clients don't understand that right away. We spend time looking at analogous services, meaning they're not really directly a competitor, but they're, let's look at how Netflix distributes content, or let's look at how, Zoom video conferencing, might work. And it's a parallel to what it is that you're trying to do. And so can we find other useful patterns in these analogous product experiences that would help generate like good ideas about the solution? So
Right.
it's a lot. It's the teams are
But we're
chewing through a lot of
but
stuff.
it's a creative process, right?
Yeah.
Because we're going wide, as you said. We're looking at we're looking at the whole landscape. We're exploring. It's a very fun part of the process. You'll learn, and then sometimes you bump into things that you didn't expect, and that's okay. We want to learn those things too. Throughout the time we're experimenting, we're still paying attention to those experiments that we're running. We talked about in kind of the previous episode of each of these. So, for example, we said we begin with empathy for the user. So we've perhaps made some assumptions about the users, but then when we get to the interviews, now we're proving it, right? Like the rubber's on the road at that point. And maybe we learn that we didn't make good assumptions, but
or maybe
that's super important early in the process.
Yeah, maybe it's a little more nuanced than we thought. That there's differences between users that are both true, but they can maybe have conflicting interests or competing interests.
Yeah. So then we've gone and we've looked at the market, we've looked at the user. Now we want to really begin to kind of make some decisions at this point, because we've got to get to a point where we are defining the problem. So what informs that? Where do we go next?
So there's a point, where, and it'll vary with the complexity and the risk factors on the project, but, we can't go down every path, every avenue. We are on a timeline, and we have to make smart decisions and try to inform the process as best we can. But there is a point where we go from diverging and start to converge towards a strategic recommendation. And so to do that, as we're collecting all these learnings, usually, like our designers are starting to map some of these key patterns and ideas. Maybe it's, early ideas about the journey that a user goes through. We use things like journey maps or experience maps. One that we use a lot is called a job map, that is really kind of breaking down, if I'm trying to complete a job or satisfy the needs of a task, like what are all the things that I need to do to get to that? All those steps, all of those have various little mini goals in associated with them. And there's places where it's going really well, and there's places where it's not going so well. And how can we take those problems that we've uncovered and now start to reframe them as opportunities to create value? So that's where we really start to get into this discussion about what would be most valuable if we could do this in software. And, software doesn't solve every problem. So we want to think wide about what's the total thing that the user is trying to do. Where's the role that the software can play in that sometimes bigger journey? And now let's start to kind of break down kind of where those opportunities are. Can we get any kind of early feedback? So, we talked before about user interviews, usually when we're doing qualitative research, we try to do smaller sets of interviews, but maybe do them more often is a goal. There is a point in here where it can be really helpful to start to put together a simple survey and go out and get quantitative data that, can we say, hey, we spent time with users like you. These are the needs. Now help us understand the importance of these needs and how satisfied are you with the current solutions that you have at your disposal. And we can get some very important insight to help drive strategy around not all problems are equal. Like these needs are more important to users to solve than maybe some of these other things. And that really helps the team drive focus about the strategy for building the first release of the product, and what really starts to emerge as the priorities. Like users need X, Y, and Z to do this job. That is complete in of itself, and we could build a product just around those pieces. But we now know that we could address other problems over time, and we start to have a sense of how we can grow and expand the software. So helping a client make those kind of navigate all those trade-offs and those decisions informed by the research and the digging around that we're doing in the understand half of that is really what informs product strategy. And that it's a dance, but it's super valuable to do that up front.
So when we say product strategy, just to be clear, we're talking about it's really the combining all of these different things that we've learned about the user and how they're solving a problem today and their whole context, about the competitive landscape, what other products are in the market or competing processes, trends in the industry, in other products that we see that might inform and kind of bring creative ideas to the party. And then bringing that all together and prioritizing what problems we're going to solve, we want the product to solve. And then, of course, one of the other themes that we've been talking about is how do we keep the team aligned, our team and the whole team, in this case, our client's team, how do we all stay aligned so that we're all together in this process, that we're clear on the problems that we're solving. So is that did I get that right?
Yeah. Yeah, we are setting up and starting to prioritize these issues, and sometimes it is like, in playing pool, it's like trying to make a combination shot of, we know we're trying to move your business in a certain direction, but as your product team, we can't just go out and dial up customers or revenue for you. We have to do it through the product. So given the various problems that we're trying to solve, what can we do in the product that will result in moving the business in the right direction? And therefore, this process is, one where we're starting to align, these are high priority problems to solve that align and will result in moving you. And we need to now kind of flesh that out as we move into how would we do it and what the solutions are. Making those choices are hard. So when we now know that these are kind of the highest areas of opportunity to drive in the product, we try to bring that to the surface early on and get everybody aligned around that. When we talk about product strategy, it's a really sort of like, what is the mission of the product, and what's the primary mission of the product, and therefore what features most likely align to that. And therefore, if those are the features we're going to build underneath the hood, we know we need to do an integration, or we got to build a database, or we're going to need some algorithm development that's going to help scoring some part of this, or we can start to align. This vision is starting to come together about what that first release of the software needs to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. Can you think of any examples where through this the work we're doing to identify clear problems, that we ended up in a place that we never expected. That's like where we are at this stage was different than the idea that we started out with. Do you think of any examples?
Sometimes, we work with like a product where we have, kind of subject matter experts who really understand like a technology and a particular aspect of their work. We had worked with kind of a legal product that had a search engine that was really smart, and they knew the technology under the hood. It was using some very smart technology, and they wanted to turn that into a product. So in turning it into a product, we, through this process of discovery, it became less about, it's not only about the search and the results of the search, but how do I organize those search results? How do I package those results in a way that I can control as your attorney, and maybe take a subset of that I actually want to recommend to my client? And how do I communicate that? How do I keep that secure? There are aspects of that experience that they just had not considered yet. And that came out of that understanding of kind of what the end user of the software would really need. Like, it's one thing that we do great search, find the information that you need, present it really clearly, but understanding kind of how does that have to get packaged? How does it get shared? How does their end client respond to it? How do we keep it secure? That really kind of opened the eyes of the client, and they realized that there's more to this than what they were originally expecting. We did early prototypes, and once we started getting that back in front of some of the end users who were attorneys that would use the software, we got great validation that you're really thinking it through. You're really thinking through kind of what the end of the road looks like once I get that packaged results out of the search. It's not just about the search. So
I'm thinking about another project that we're about to launch right now that's in the fitness space, and really successful leader in the fitness space. Had actually done some work on an existing mobile app and brought that, and kind of, it wasn't going well, and they wanted to take it to the next level. But in this problem space, when we started to really dig into it, what we realized, and what he realized, was he wanted to solve a whole different problem, and that he went from kind of like one direction to a whole different product vision that we began to validate. And now we're launching a product that looks very different than where we started in the discovery workshop. So it's a great example of how things can evolve, how user interviews and competitive analysis, all this stuff can change the trajectory of a whole product. We're working with somebody right now I know who realized that there were a lot more competitors than he thought. And now we're paying more attention to kind of the differentiation of that product, and perhaps going deeper into certain feature sets because of what other products in the market are doing well or not doing well.
Right.
All of that's informing this product strategy. How do you come up with the right problems to solve?
Yeah, seeing kind of the relative value. We can go down, path A, B, or C. We came into this project thinking it was A, but now there's real evidence, and now there's real signs that we could see that really the real opportunity that's high value with the user, differentiating in the market, and we know that we could technically do it, supports the business goals that it's B. And let's identify that early and align and say, okay, B is the direction, and this is, the direction that we want to pursue.
Yeah, this has been super helpful. Thank you. If there was kind of one key idea or takeaway that you'd want people to think about in this problem space, what would it be?
So, part of the magic of understanding frame is, using it to expose these blind spots. So giving an opportunity for discovery to do its job and start to let these other insights kind of emerge. So I'd say the one thing is give it time. We try to balance, when we talk about balancing rigor and speed, like we know we don't have all the time in the world. We're trying to move quickly, but you do want to be looking down sort of multiple avenues to create value and see where we are, and let that evidence that you're starting to collect drive that strategy, and not relying too heavily on assumption right out of the gate that you have the one correct answer. Now, we haven't tested the assumptions yet. That's going to come in a little bit, but being able to look through multiple lenses of user needs and market and business and technology really is going to pay off down the line as the teams start to really thread their way through the optimal solution. Now there's like an understanding of kind of where the real, I don't want to say inflection points, but like the real sweet spot is to hit something that navigates all of that well.
I'm glad you said that, because for me, this is a point in the process where you really have to have a lot of patience. You have to be curious, eager to learn, but we're not talking about solutions yet, and everybody wants to jump right to the solutions. Right. So it takes patience to really make sure, because this is when it's going to pay off. If we solve the right problems, then that's going to pay off down the road in user adoption and all the things that you want at the end. Yeah. This is such an important piece. So thank you again. Thanks for joining us for this episode where we really went deep into product strategy. Join us in our next episode when we're going to move from the problems to one of my favorite parts, which is the solution space, and take a deep dive on how we create solutions. Look forward to seeing you then.